Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Business Edge podcast. My name is Phil Matee. I am here with Dr. Joshua Lupinek. He is the Assistant Professor of Sport Marketing here at the Feliciano School of Business, which is in the Department of Hospitality and Tourism. So welcome, Dr. Lupinek. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be on.
So before we begin our discussion here, we're talking about how COVID has impacted the sports industry. We've done several of these podcasts over the past 12 months and looking at how COVID has impacted different industries. And this is the first conversation we're having about the sports industry. And for those of you who are listening, whether it's your first time, please look up our Business Edge podcast channel, which is on several podcast sites like Spotify, Amazon, Buzzsprout. So I encourage you to take a look at other episodes. But today we're here to talk about with the sports industry and how COVID has impacted it. And Dr. Lupinek is going to spend some time with us going through it. So before we begin, I guess the first question here is, what impact has COVID has had on the major sports leagues, MLB, NBA, NFL, and NHL? From a revenue standpoint, I think, Josh, I'm a big fan of sports, and this is near and dear to my heart. But I know there's some really big losses that have occurred over the past, I guess, year now, because today is March 30th. So it's about a year since COVID has impacted the world. So if you can give us a sense of, from a revenue standpoint, how has it impacted the industry?
Yeah, thank you, Phil. And first, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that it's great to be a part of the Montclair State University campus. This is my second year here by way of the University of Alaska. And when we talk about the impact COVID's had on a lot of my colleagues working in the industry, they're pivoting and they're looking to get back in as the world kind of kickstarts again in the sport industry. So it's great. It's great to be here. And one of the notes that I pulled for today was it's estimated about 14.5 billion in lost revenue from the big four leagues. That's kind of the COVID impact, 14.5 billion. And to put that in perspective, I pulled a kind of like a fun fact of the day and spun it to sports. So it's March 30th when we're recording here. And on this day in 1867, the US bought Alaska from Russia for 7.2 million, right? We just talked about 14.5 billion in losses for a year across four major sport leagues. And Alaska was purchased for 7.2 million. And then if you pull that into today's money, that would equal about 130 million through inflation and whatnot. So to spin that in a sports sense, that's about what the St. Louis Cardinals will spend on payroll this year. So we bought Alaska from Russia for a St. Louis Cardinals payroll. And then you think about what 14.5 billion, how the sport industry has grown and what that money, what that dollar amount really means. It's incredible.
Yes, it's interesting because as a sports fan, when you think of last March, when the whole world was going through COVID, we were learning every day what was going on, how the sports industry reacted to it, whether the whole point of allowing fans into the games or into the arenas or the stadiums. And, it was happening by the hour, it seemed like there was so much happening, and how these teams, regardless of whatever leagues they were in, how they had to react to it to, one, ensure the safety of their players and their coaches and their staff, but also safety of their fans. And it seemed like every day there was announcements coming out from different teams or different arenas or stadiums reacting to it. And it took some time for them to get their arms around it. But, revenue, of course, is the heart of how this industry is running. And if you could share with us, give us some ideas on what these major leagues, sport leagues, what they've lost in revenue.
Sure. Yeah. So I have some notes on the big four, and it's kind of interesting because leagues shut down at different times. The world kind of stopped at the same time. And for me, that was March 11th. It was no comparison, obviously, to 9/11, but it was one of those moments that I'll remember where I was when the NBA pulled their games, and then the NHL, and I was working a minor league hockey game that night, and I remember just being in the locker room, seeing that after, and being like, okay, guys, this is this is happening. You guys are going to remember this is the last game, the hockey game we're going to see for a while. So, and I say that because some, like the NHL, NBA, they were mid-season when we shut down. Others, the NFL, if you would call them fortunate, they got their Super Bowl in 2020 before the shutdown. So different, obviously, different seasons, different times. But for the NFL, it's estimated about 5.5 billion in revenue losses from COVID. So remember, we talked 14.5 billion. The NFL alone is, 5.5 billion, perhaps more. And I'm gonna rattle some numbers real quick, and then I want to go back to the NFL. But 2.5 billion for the NHL, 3.5 billion NBA, 3 billion MLB, and those are revenue losses related to home games and some TV money. When the 14.5 number really comes from is TV contracts and some other things that aren't related to tickets and gate receipts and hosting, right? So let's go back to the NFL for a second, right? What impact has it had? Well, we're seeing right now a very strange salary cap year related, because the salary cap, if you're not a big sport fan, salary cap is kind of the maximum amount that you can pay your roster for a given season. So, you kind of take your star quarterback in the NFL, typically is the highest paid player on the roster, and you kind of are working backwards, and everybody is coming up for contract renewals at different times and free agency and all that. But the salary cap is tied to revenue. So now, for the first time in history, the NFL has a lower salary cap going into this upcoming fall of 2021 start of the season. Never happened before, probably will never happen again. But because of the lost revenue from last season, teams have less money, regardless of how wealthy an owner is. They're only allowed to pay their roster X amount of dollars, and that's the salary cap. So now they have to look at cutting costs. So I bring to example in the NFL, the New England Patriots free agency anomaly. Typically, the New England Patriots do not spend a lot of money in free agency. If you're a big football person, you kind of know that they're not out there signing, star players to large contracts in free agency. They're always looking for bubble talent. Perhaps the player that 28 teams kind of passed on, but they have super high potential and value signings is how I would kind of display that. So because of that, they've stayed true to that strategy. Whether it's the right or wrong strategy, we learn and we talk about in class in the Feliciano School of Business all the time. You have to have a plan. You have to understand who you are as a business. And you have to understand who your customers are and what your mission is. Are you out there to make money? Are you out there to win championships? Okay. The Patriots have a business strategy. They've developed that strategy and they've stuck to it. So regardless if you agree to it, the New England Patriots are very refined and steady in their business strategy per our external view, right? None of us work for the New England Patriots. Maybe some organizational representatives will be listening in to the podcast, but I can't speak to the inside the walls. But in 9 days, the Patriots spent $159.6 million to overhaul their roster. They are in a position to take advantage of this weird market blip because of COVID, based on a business strategy and identifying these high potential value signings. Because with the salary cap going down this year, one time, all these other teams who would normally be going after these star players do not have the money available to sign them. It's unfortunate for those players that randomly came into free agency during a down market year. You feel for those players not being able to capitalize on perhaps their 2018 or 2022 potential. So maybe they're signing shorter term deals because they're hoping to going to make less money because of COVID revenue decreases. So maybe they're shorter contracts, but now the New England Patriots, they're able to sign a higher caliber of player because they have more cap space, so they have more money available to fill their roster. And we might never see this again. And I'm not saying it's good. It's unfortunate, obviously, for many parties, but the New England Patriots are actually able to capitalize on that. That's not what the country wants to hear after seeing the Patriots win so many Super Bowls over the years. But they didn't make the playoffs last year. They need some help. But I don't think the world's ready to let them be helped yet, as far as we put our fan hats back on. But they have a business strategy that they've stuck to, and they've had revenue losses. And their owner, Robert Kraft, came out and said, in all my years of ownership, I've never been asked to come out and put up this much capital in such a short amount of time. But, it's not much different than playing the stock market and taking advantage of an opportunity that falls in your lap. So the NFL, 5.5 billion in revenue losses, advantage New England Patriots in 9 days. So interesting.
What's amazing is, or sad, is part of these revenue losses, which people fail, or some people maybe not or notice, is that in these arenas and stadiums, there are thousands of employees that work there, that are ticket agents, they work in the concessions, or they are security. They lost their jobs within a matter of days, and these are individuals that are not making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they were without jobs. And it was a sad situation, because I know some of the teams, from what I heard, they were helping, or they were giving them some type of severance or helping their employees out during this time. But it really affects everyone. And you mentioned 9/11, and one thing that I remember after 9/11, when the New York teams weren't playing for a few days, the Mets and the Yankees, and then eventually baseball went back on. And it really was a diversion. And think of how horrific that time was in this country, especially in the New York area. But to be able to turn on the TV and watch a Met game or a Yankee game really took your mind off of things. And that really helped people to kind of mentally, for that hour or 2 hours. And I thought about that when you said that, regarding during COVID, where the leagues weren't playing. So not only were we dealing with this horrible situation where you have people getting sick and dying, there was nothing really to divert our mind for that evening to put on a basketball game or a baseball game. And so sports are part of the fabric of this country. And the fact that, and I remember ESPN had nothing to show, and they were showing games from years ago, where they were showing games from other countries. Weren't they at one point? I think ESPN was showing some baseball games from different countries, I think, at one point, because they had nothing to air on television. But people were just hungry for sports, and just especially during this time. So
sure, and thanks for bringing that up, Phil. And not discounting any of the negative, and our hearts go out to so many, but we're here talking today about sport and sport and the fun side of why we all enjoy being fans. And one of the most difficult parts of the beginning of the pandemic shutdown in March was, okay, now we're all in our residences, and normally I don't have time to watch TV because I'm in the car, I have a commute, we're working at a sporting event, but all of a sudden, the one time we have time to watch TV, there's nothing on. If you're a sport fan, there's no live content, right? You just made that ESPN example. And it was just a really strange and unique time. But I want to bring back to the first part that you said, as far as lost jobs, and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know how long this podcast will have legs, and for our listeners out there who are listening in 2022 and beyond. In our class, I won't mention for confidentiality which team it was, but one of our New York baseball teams was in our sports sales class that we have here in the Feliciano School of Business 3 weeks ago. And it was an inside sales manager, and he was very grateful that his organization only cut 25% of their staff. That is a lot less than many up to 75% across MLB in a temporary shutdown scenario. So obviously there still were cuts, there were lost jobs, but they're out there right now recruiting. They don't have the jobs to offer, but they're building a database of talent, because they are a month away or so from starting the sales season for 2022. We haven't even broke the first pitch yet of the Major League Baseball season, Yet we're out here talking about ticket sales for the summer of 2022 because they're essentially saying whatever we get this year, it's going to be fine in 2021. We have the season ticket base. Nobody sells out 100% of their season tickets. That's bad. That's bad business because you want single game sales and a lot of other reasons, which is why it's a great class. And we have great students, but they will have the season ticket base to support whatever capacity they're at. Their push is already 2022 in the hope of the vaccine normalcy and things like that. So our students, my colleagues who are currently looking for that next spot, there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're just, we're still reaching for it. It's not here yet. The end of the tunnel isn't here. We're still holding our breath, but it's coming.
Well, the biggest global event, biggest global sporting event that all countries and most countries participate in is the Olympics. Tokyo 2020 did not happen, obviously. So what's going on with the summer games, and is that going to happen this year or next year? And what are some of the implications of that cancellation that happened last year?
That's a great question, Phil. And Tokyo 2020 is now Tokyo 2021. And by all accounts, sitting here on the 30th of March in 2021, it's going to happen. And a lot of that success goes to the big four leagues in North America, some who participate in a bubble environment and some who have not. We're currently winding down our March Madness tournament, which has never looked this way before, but I believe that we're all grateful for those student athletes and providing that live entertainment source, even if we're not able to be there. But the athletes are going to be able to compete, it looks like. But what's really interesting is at what capacity are these events going to be housed? The IOC, they're able to fund through broadcast rights across the globe for revenue, for gate receipts. And it's interesting you ask, because earlier this month, I was reading an article that Japan made the call to block international spectators from attending the Olympics and the Paralympics. So those happen kind of a couple months apart over in Tokyo due to the pandemic. And it's just led to a flood of refund requests. So if you are, from the US and you're planning to go to Tokyo, you're probably not going by yourself, part of a group of friends, family. So this article talked about how it was more than $10,000 in some cases, refund requests from fans that purchased tickets years ago. They've been holding on to that money and hoping, and now they're trying to get that back. And what's really interesting is CoSport, which is the exclusive rights holder for the Olympic ticket. Oh man, let me go back and restart that sentence. It happens too much. You get going, get excited. So CoSport is the exclusive rights holder. There we go, for ticket sales of the Olympics in the US. Got that one out. So they announced that they are not going to refund their 20%, that's high, 20% handling fee for American fans. And this is per a Yahoo article, by the way, if you want to fact check me. And I don't know what kind of blowback they're going to get for that once the Olympics actually happens and once this becomes more popular, right? Because we're starting to lead into that news cycle for the Olympics and it's not really hitting mainstream yet. But there might be some big blowback and they might change that policy. But for right now, if somebody paid $10,000, which many have, to bring a group over, you're withholding $2,000 from a family and they're not able to go. That just seems kind of extreme for some cases. So, but that's country specific. In the UK, it's a company called Team GB Live, and they said they'll offer full refunds. So long-winded answer that you asked for, but the Olympics, it looks like Tokyo 2020 is now 2021. It's a go for the athletes. It's a go for TV. It's going to be a made-for-TV Olympics more so than in the past. You think about how the NHL pivoted their stadium series games outside to Lake Tahoe this spring, where there weren't any fans, but it was a beautiful backdrop. It's just kind of really interesting how we're pivoting still to made-for-TV events, and the Olympics are going to try to do that as well.
Over the past few weeks, I know New York and New Jersey, which is where we are, they've loosened their restrictions. So I know like the Yankees and Mets, they're going to be allowing fans into the stadium, I think 10%, and the Brooklyn Nets. And so I know they're allowing fans to come back in. But, some people may argue, and I've heard this, is there's a fine line, because when owners obviously want the games to be held and they want the basketball, baseball, football games to happen, and we as fans, we want to watch it on television, which we still are, but there's obviously no fans, or a limited amount of fans. But there's always that argument of, and I've heard this from antagonists who will say, well, we putting our players and staff and fans at risk, albeit at a 10 or 20% capacity of an outdoor stadium or indoor arena, simply to make owners money. Because ultimately that's who's making the money. I mean, obviously it creates jobs, which we're happy about, or brings jobs back, which it helps people that are unable to or weren't able to work of no fault of their own, simply because of the restrictions. But the winners in all this are the owners. They're the ones who make the most money. And obviously the players make a lot of money. But do you get a sense that owners are clamoring for these games to happen simply because they're losing, as you mentioned earlier, millions or billions of dollars? Or do you feel that it is safe? You and I live in New Jersey, so I know there's sports happening every day and fans are coming back. But do you think we're doing that at the expense of the safety of the fans and the staff of the players by bring these people back into the arenas and the stadiums?
What a great question. And that is a really muddy one, Phil, and I'll do my best. And this is opinion based. I don't want to get into politics and vaccine talk and all that, but it's all a part of this, right? So we can be as mad as we want about the owners for making money. They lost their butts last year, and fortunately, they have more than one cheek to sit on, because they're doing pretty well owning these teams. But hopefully, it's just a blip for them. I like to think of it from a consumer perspective. If my father and I are both vaccinated, one from being of a certain age and one from being a teacher, right or wrong, if that's the way it is, and we feel comfortable enough to go attend an outside baseball game together, why not? Why not leave that on the individual? Why not say, I don't mean to be morbid here, but like, how many years of life are we willing to give up before choice and what it means to be an American and make those choices for yourself really digs in? So I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that, as you know, it's way different. It was way different in New York than it was in Florida through the pandemic, right? Right or wrong, not touching it. But what I will say is that as an American, I believe it is our right to choose our own risk assessment level for our daily activities. So if that's my perspective as a consumer, if you're sitting there as an owner, we're following the CDC guidelines. Organizations, many of them have gone above and beyond to provide an additional experience for their normal season ticket holders, or give them value in future years, and make them feel a part of the family of the organization. But if there are people out there that feel comfortable and safe, whether it's right or wrong, why not be open for business and provide that, as long as you're following the rules? So I don't think I answered your question, Phil, directly, but I'm just providing an opinion from a consumer perspective on. I'm not saying what the right risk assessment level is, but I think you got to leave it in the hands of the consumers as right to choose.
Yeah, and of course, these teams are following CDC guidelines, so they're keeping that in mind. It's not like they're deviating from what the CDC is recommending. And I'll make a statement, then we'll get to the next question. This happened with March Madness last year at the NCAA, which we'll talk about bad timing. I mean, that's a huge event. And I remember early on, NCAA canceled. Their plan was to keep the games, but don't bring in the fans. And then a few days later, I think they just canceled the entire tournament because of pressure they were getting at the other leagues. So it's a touchy subject, and I think we're definitely in a better place than we were a year ago. and we'll see how this all plays out. The good news is things are getting better, and I think the teams, because I read yesterday with Major League Baseball, they even came out with a rule that if 85% of the team players and the staff are vaccinated, that when they're together, they don't have to wear masks any longer. They could pretend it's 2019 because 85% are vaccinated. So this is, and they're planning on when these teams come back to their home stadiums, which will come back this week as the season begins, I think on Thursday or Friday, that the players, they'll be able to be vaccinated. So hopefully if they get to the 85%, then players and the staff and coaches and managers there can all kind of, but then when they leave that little bubble, they'll have to put masks on and be socially distanced, and because they'll be interacting with fans and the general public. So again, yeah, no, you're right. It's a very complicated subject. So let's talk about
Before we pivot, may I comment on that?
Sure.
Yeah, so one of the things too is the key point to remember back is it was the availability of testing availability was a big thing, and that was part of what shut down the NCAA tournament last year. Because why should sport talk about the luxury of having this conversation as a first world problem discussion, right? But think about why should testing be earmarked for the NCAA basketball tournament, men and women, when other people need it critically. So we're moving past that. Like you said, we're going in the right direction. And in the spirit of giving opinions, unfortunately, I don't think it's the last pandemic of our lifetime. I think it's the first. But this is hopefully going to dictate how we respond and handle it better in the future.
Which leads me to my next question, which is which league was most successful in managing COVID, especially on the impact on their players and the season of the four majors?
Well, I don't know which one is most successful, but definitely which one was most fortunate has to be the NFL. You know, I'm a hockey guy. I love golf, but the NFL is my favorite sport to watch on television. You know, but they were the most fortunate. They got their 2020 Super Bowl in right before the official pandemic. There was some slight discussion and concern. And then talk about scheduling luck with 2021 being scheduled in Florida. You know, if it was scheduled in a different state, the state government might have shut it down, but Florida had a different viewpoint on restrictions, and they have an outside stadium. You know, if it was in the new stadium in Minneapolis for the Vikings, it probably wouldn't have happened there. They would have had to shift it. So they were the most fortunate because they got in their 2020 championship, and then their 2021 scheduled to be outside, and then they were able to let a limited number of fans in to experience. And also hats off to the NFL. They did a great job with the cardboard cutouts and everything from a TV, made for TV perspective. You know, I had my wife came in and was like, how are there so many people there? You know, you're just walking by, right? So they did a good job visually for TV, but they were definitely the most fortunate. The most success, and we're going to take money out of it, not in terms of revenue, but the most successful restart in the pandemic, in my opinion, was the NHL and how they restarted in a pure real bubble scenario in Edmonton. And they got through their entire revamped close to regular season. They kind of did a little different. And then their playoffs with 0 positive cases up in Edmonton. And that's incredible. That's a hats off to the NHL and everybody in the city of Edmonton. The MLB was probably the biggest mess, if you want to think about the other side of the coin. But they were the first non-bubble attempt. So hats off to them for giving it a try if they felt comfortable. But they had a lot of, you know, they had a lot of issues, and you know, they got through it, but it was a mess. And then, you know, probably the best use of resources would be the NBA, because thinking about the difference between an ice rink and a basketball court, you know, it's a little bit different of a setup, and how they moved to Disney in Florida, and they had all those made for TV courts you saw throughout their restart and playoffs and ballrooms. So hats off to Disney and the NBA and that relationship with ABC, ESPN for making that happen when there was a time when, as America, if you were a sport fan at all, regardless of sport, I'm not a big basketball person, we needed that content. We needed that live content in our lives to provide that little bit of normalcy for a few minutes. So those are some thoughts there.
I'm not sure if you felt the same way, but watching a game, whether it's baseball or hockey or football, whatever game, without fans, it was just different. And when you're at home watching it, it wasn't as exciting. it seemed a lot different to me. I'm not sure if you had the same feeling. I still watched it, but you just realize how much the fans play a part of the game. And when they're not there, when you can actually hear quarterbacks yelling out plays and guys yelling to each other on the bench, and that was kind of cool hearing all that. But then you miss the fans, right? It seemed like so different.
Not only do you miss the fans, it actually has a minor impact to the game outcome, regardless of sport. Players, coaches, officials, they feel the pressure. You don't necessarily hear the one comment calling you a bum. Sometimes you do if it's well timed, but you feel the pressure building. You hear the roar. That can impact a player. You think about in football, you hear the roar, that gives somebody a little extra juice to get an extra half a gear in on a punt return, or the pressure that can put on a pitcher in Major League Baseball, or an official even, or how a coach interacts, and the pressure. You think of one of the biggest criticisms we have of NFL coaches is their use of timeouts. We're all timeout coaches on the couch, right, in the NFL, but there's so much going on, and pressure can dictate that. So I'm not saying you would have had a different champion, a different outcome in any league, but there's a very micro level that actually impacts all stakeholders of the game.
Yeah, good point, because there really was no home field advantage, because every stadium or arena was kind of a neutral territory. So
You just had a locker room advantage.
Yeah. I mean, and here's an unrelated question, because I just have to ask you this, because I know you're a Patriots fan, and you mentioned the 2021 Super Bowl. So how did you feel for Tom Brady when he won a Super Bowl a year out after leaving the mothership of the Patriot organization? Were you happy for Tom?
Well, thank you for bringing that up for our audience, Phil. I might have lost a couple of people just turning this podcast off now, but I'm born and raised Connecticut, so we're a split state. My wife's a Giants fan. We have the Wicked line running down 91. But anyways, I'm proud to be a part of the mothership. We were very bad in my childhood. So did we deserve to be this good for this long? Probably not, but it is what it is. And I was happy for Tom Brady at that point. When you had that Super Bowl matchup, I was rooting for the Bucs because of Tom Brady. I don't wish any like Brady is better than Belichick or vice versa. I don't really get into all of that. I kind of wished it was a Patriots Bucs Super Bowl. That would have been just awesome. But that wasn't meant to be. But I don't hate the move as a business person, as a marketing person. You get older, the bones get tired, no state income tax in Florida. It's nice.
Yeah, it's hard feeling sorry for Patriot fans when you hear them crying about, their bad season and they lost Brady. I'm like, you kidding me? You won all these. I'm a Giants fan, so I'm not a big fan of the Patriots, but I'm like, you want me to feel sorry for you with all your titles? Like, that run that Brady had will never happen again. I think we can all agree that you'll never see that dynasty in professional sports, especially in football, because of salary cap and, how the average career of a football player is 3 or 4 years. So yeah, you guys had it good for a long time. So,
and speaking of dynasty, something I saw the other day was an interview with Cal Ripken, and you forget about his impact on baseball and being the Iron Man in like 2,000 something games. I forget the actual number. And the current Iron Man in MLB is like 300 something. He's only 14 seasons away from catching Cal. So what an incredible run that is. And there's just certain things in life that you'll probably never see again. And I agree, that's one of them.
Yeah, that's definitely one of them. And I do think the spending, well, it'll be interesting to see what the Patriots do with respect to quarterback. I know they re-signed Cam Newton, and there's rumor that they're going after quarterback in the draft, or potentially getting Jimmy G back from the 49ers. So what do you think is going to happen there? Who's going to be the starting quarterback in September?
I like the hyperbole around Jimmy G coming back. Belichick groomed him, and he understands, you could call it the Patriot way, or just the system and the way that team operates. And if that's a good fit for Mr. Garoppolo, then it's definitely a good fit for the Patriots. As far as a fan, let me just put my Feliciano School of Business cap off and put my Patriots hat on for a second. I was happy to see the Cam Newton signing, and I'm glad that he's back regardless of his role as a starter or a backup. He struggled last season for sure, but you can't deny that man's work ethic, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah, it seems that that's the direction. And that's why I think Brady was, even more satisfied, because they're winning a Super Bowl outside of New England because he was outside of the system. He didn't want, now he proved that the system is not the reason why he won Super Bowls, because he now won it with a different team at 43, however old he is now. So.
Sure. And lastly to that, Phil, you talked before about the salary cap blip and the Patriots taking advantage of that. The roster for Tampa is loaded compared to what the Patriots ever was. So there was some advantages there. And I'm sure those discussions happen behind closed doors, and Brady says, hey, I'm willing to come. This is what I would like for a commitment. And looks like they made that happen for him.
Yeah, I think I read yesterday they're the first team that brought back all their starters for 2021 for the season. The first Super Bowl winning team that has brought back all their starters. So they're going to have the same exact team for the 21 season. So, all right, let's talk about the future. What is the future of live attendance at these arenas and stadiums, and how will it be different than pre-COVID?
Sure. I guess the biggest example right now is just thinking about MSG and the Rangers and other indoor venues. Just showing a negative test result to gain entry is really interesting, and that has had a boom for a lot of private testing and medical companies that weren't really in the sport space, but now are, when you think of different apps and the easeability and integration. In New York State, you have access to free testing, just like in New Jersey, but those results can take time, right? Versus a rapid test, and where can you get those? So there's a new inventory in the sports space, and that's testing, and hopefully that inventory goes away in the future. But it's just going to be an ill-defined, complex, constantly changing problem. I borrowed that from Professors Riddle and Weber way back when at Cal Berkeley, when they defined that as the wicked problem. So I mentioned that I don't believe this is the last one in my lifetime. Unfortunately, it's just the first, but we're going to be way better equipped to handle it in the future. So what does that future look like? Because of the pandemic, teams are completely revamping ticketing software. They didn't have to before, but now they're pushed. You got pod purchases happening now. So now you have software where you're able to share. If Phil, we were going to go out to Yankee Stadium, I could share you my unique code, and you could see exactly where I'm sitting. You could sit on the left and right of me. Before the pandemic, that no way. Who's buying them, me or you? Like you give me some money and I'll hop on Ticketmaster. You didn't have that functionality. So now you can also do that for a whole family when you think of a pod, given availability of inventory and everything. So this is really true in the minor league or a non-sellout mentality, where the team is going to have that space where you say, hey, season ticket holders, we got some extra space here. We're going to open up a couple seats on either side if you have anybody in your family pod that you want to get in. So that's just enhanced ticketing is really changed and for the better. I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think one of the things, and this is not a discussion on sports, but this whole idea of a vaccine passport that a fan can, because like you and I, we obviously trust science because we've been vaccinated. But I think that if the CDC came out with the fact that if you're vaccinated, we know that we're 90 to 95% immune based on a Moderna and Pfizer or Johnson, whatever vaccine you're getting. But once CDC comes out and says that you can't transmit the virus, I think that's a game changer for sports and anything, any large venue with thousands of people, because then you're saying, well, you prove that you're vaccinated, what's a passport, whatever you want to call it. And then I think that makes it a lot easier for people to say, well, I know I'm vaccinated, I can prove it. And the CDC came out with the fact that I can't transmit it, even if I am a carrier of it. That's a big deal, because, I've read about coming to an arena and showing that you have a negative test, but you're negative of 3 days ago, because you're taking the COVID test 3 days, and typically it takes 2 or 3 days to get the results back. So is that really an indicator because you could have COVID, right? You don't know. It's not like you're being tested that moment. It's not like it's a swab test or a rapid test. So I think the CDC has a big part in all this. That was just my point.
Sure. Well, first of all, I made my choice, and I feel like it's personal. I think that you couldn't sell me on the not side of the vaccine, but I do understand some of my colleagues and other people who are hesitant, reluctant, or have decided they're not going to get the vaccine. I get it. I really do. And I don't say that choice is bad, but there's a lot of, I don't think that choice is for the masses, right? So there's personal reasons not to do that. And I totally agree with those. My point related to what you said, Phil, was that once every American is eligible to get the vaccine if they want, once they have that choice, that's the tipping point. Because you remember, we're doing things, restrictions based on CDC, what is safe with a vaccine framework. And if you are choosing not to get the vaccine, you are essentially saying that I'm okay with the risk of COVID being in the world and normal exposure through my everyday life. So if you make that choice and then you attend a sporting event, then you are adding that risk, sure, but you've already made your choice on that risk. So as a team, you don't have to worry about people who are not going to get the vaccine. So I don't think you have to worry about that population, which I understand and respect for different reasons. The tipping point is once not scheduled, once every person who would like the vaccine is eligible to have gotten it, that's the tipping point. I don't know, right? Like, the president made his talk and, 4th of July goal and all that, but kind of makes you hopeful for Christmas next year as far as that tipping point.
Yeah, it's more of a question of perception of safety. So even when hopefully we get to a point where we can go to games and feel safe and not have these restrictions, but it's always in the back of our mind. People are always going to be afraid. It's never going to be 2019 again. That's gone. And I remember when there was a 14-day lockdown back in March of 2020, and we all thought that after 14 days we would go out of our homes and live our life normally, which obviously it didn't happen because there were additional lockdowns and quarantines. But I think it's more making people feel safe, and it's analogous to 9/11, making people feel safe to fly again. And I remember weeks and months after that, people were afraid to fly, obviously, and understood that of a fear of terrorism. And I think it's the same thing now with COVID, having people feel safe. Like and Mayor de Blasio mentioned that Broadway's going to open back up in September. And of course, there'll be different restrictions of such, but you're still going to have the people that are going to be afraid, whether they're vaccinated or not, they're going to be afraid to go. And I think that's natural, and that's going to take time. And hopefully we get to a place of herd immunity where we're 70 or 80% vaccinated. And then at that point, per CDC, we could take our masks off and then we'll all be fine. But we'll see when we get there. But again, it's always that the perception of people being afraid of something's going to go wrong, or they're going to get or going to get infected. So let's wrap up here on the last question about how will the fan experience change in post-COVID by each league? So kind of top line by each league, how is it going to be different?
Sure. NFL, more open air Super Bowls for sure for planning. I'm going to try to push those more outside. It gives them more flex than a dome. The NHL just had a new TV deal with ESPN. They're coming back to ESPN ABC, 7-year, $2.8 billion deal. And, there's going to be more TV location-based outdoor games, in my opinion, made for TV events with limited spectators. The spectators you mentioned who are still going to be afraid, we're in a better place to accommodate those. Obviously, that might come with additional cost to the fan, but there's a way now. We understand how to make safe. And you want predictions. America is never going to be healthier for the next 3 years after this because of all the hand sanitizer and everything in place. We take better care of our hygiene now than we ever have in our lives. And that's going to take a while to slip back. So when you think about those overall stats, you heard it here first if you didn't hear it yet. So the NBA, I think there's going to be less access to players courtside. Which is kind of interesting, more AI-based camera angles. They've been experimenting through the pandemic with no fans in positions and cameras that normally would impact sight lines. So I'm interested to see how they integrate those back when there are sellouts again. MLB, I'm not sure, but there could be more double headers. I don't know, but for right now, for the short term, you have the increased screening difficulty of getting in and showing a negative test and all that. That could lead to fans wanting to go less. but stay longer, perhaps because of the difficulty of getting in. Perhaps you could have a unique promotion where you could have a bleacher premium swing on a day-night doubleheader. You could have the bleacher seats in the afternoon and then an inclusive premium club for dinner, something like that. But one of the things that's really going to be interesting to see, Phil, is when we look back at youth sport. Youth sport on its own is a $19 billion industry. So think about the kiddos that didn't play sports last year. Then think about the kiddos in that 4, 5, 6-year-old age range who would have tried something for the first time and found out they liked it, right? I mean, we all know that you shouldn't specialize as a young kid, but you get an interest spark somewhere, and that could impact different sports, generating fandom also, because you get fandom from playing. We don't often get fandom from playing NFL. I didn't, but other sports you get an appreciation for. And then, lastly, when you think about fan experience change, more multi-purpose stadiums. So Real Madrid they're building a casino inside their stadium. I was reading an article this morning that they're revamping with a full service entertainment center where a famous soccer team happens to play. So it might be a vice versa. Going versa, and that'll finish summer 2022. The Washington Nationals plan to set up betting windows and kiosks at National Park and working to allow betting directly from the seats. The NFL, however, right, like they're still prohibiting in-stadium betting areas and kiosks, but will allow what they're calling gambling lounges. So take that for what you will right now, but that'll showcase more betting options. So we're moving in a more gambling friendly environment, and part of that is because of that $14 billion lost revenue. The leagues are a little hungrier for that income source, and that's going to change the way that our fan experience changes. It's going to impact the way our fan experience changes in the future for sure.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up youth sports, and that like for my son, he's 6, but he didn't play sports last year, and now they're playing soccer in a few weeks whenever it starts. But it was $80 for him to join the league, and then the $50 for the cleats, and then the $10 for the ball, and the $25 for the shin guards. And if you think of, you multiply that by the hundreds of thousands of kids playing in these little leagues, what the implications are from a revenue standpoint. But your point about exposing children to different sports and seeing what they gravitate towards and what they like and how it relates to fandom is an interesting point. I never heard that one before. My final question is, and this is your opinion, obviously, because we're in the midst of this, will we ever, do you think, get back to the 2019 where you just hop in your car, drive to a stadium, go through security, sit in your seat, and you have thousands of people around you cheering and clapping and heading up to the concession stand for a beer, and you're around the other 25 people and walking out with everyone? Do you think we'll ever get to that point where people are comfortable or not afraid? And will that ever happen? Again, it's opinion.
It's my opinion, Phil. It's a great question. I think we will, and it's going to be 2022, but it's never going to look the same. And what I mean by that is, think about the uproar with selling jersey space for the NBA, the NHL, for selling ad space on jerseys, right? We want a clean, professional North American uniform. Think about, this is our North American hat or US hat. Like, oh man, when we used to travel international, you go in the Asian market and you see a lot of people wearing masks. That was normal over there. And we like, what's going on here? Like, it's weird. It feels uncomfortable. Like, why are you wearing a mask? Now, we will be shoulder to shoulder, but some people are going to be wearing masks and some people are not. But there's not going to be as much of that public stigma anymore. And when you think of like a clean image, clean is probably not the right word here, but when you think of an image of what it looks like to put 80,000 people together in a packed college football stadium in the SEC, like, you would not find one person wearing a mask for any reason whatsoever. I don't know if you'll ever see that again. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Everybody's going to have a different risk assessment level moving forward. But like I said, in our lifetime, I don't know if you'll ever get 100,000 people together and have it look the same anymore. But yes, we will be rubbing on, somebody is going to spill beer on us again. It will happen. I promise you that.
And it's also predicated upon the vaccine and how long it may be. We have to get a vaccine every year. It may need a booster, or I think that's still, they haven't figured out yet. That's still the impact, or how long the vaccine lasts in your body with the antibodies. Or so if we find out we have to do this every year, if the vaccine is every year, that may change things. Or maybe we may find out that the vaccine lasts more than a year, maybe a couple of years. So yeah, there's a lot of variables here that we don't know about. We'll find out. But yeah, I'm a Giant season ticket holder. Yeah, so you could say you're sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, we had a good off season. We have big guys coming in now. We got
big moves. Yeah, you're moving.
Big moves. We'll probably be 6-10 this year as opposed to 5-11. With these big players. But we received a letter from ownership a few weeks ago as a season ticket holder saying that they're anxious and looking forward to bringing us back in September, but obviously following the state guidelines. But how do teams figure that out? Let's say in September, only 10,000 Giant fans can come into into MetLife. How do they determine which 10,000 fans get it? Is it a dumb question, but how do they do that?
It's actually a really hard question. It's not a dumb question at all. So it's organization dependent. So first off, to answer that, I'll say, since we're at the end, shout out to Mimi and Edwin Feliciano. I have an amazing job, and our business school is a big resource for everyone on campus, regardless if you're a business student or not. But all my classes here, super awesome, super fun. We've had in my 2 years here, we've worked with the Jets, we've had the Giants in, and the organizations, they're in the same house, completely different, right? So because of that, they have to understand who their organization is. Yet it all comes back to the 80-20 rule of business, where 80% of your revenue comes from the top 20% of your consumers. So you could sit there, Phil, and say, hey, I'm a valued season ticket holder, but I'm way up. You got somebody paying 50% more. They're doubling, they're tripling you up, whatever. So do the organizations look at those people differently? Do they give them first crack? It depends. Not each organization decides. They could be completely equitable and have it be a lottery system. They could have priority weighting, lotteries in between the priority weighting. Not that much different than when a team builds a brand new stadium and the seats don't align and they have to move season ticket holders and they're not exactly the same, right? So it's really tough. Every organization is doing it differently, but in general, every team is still, that I've heard, is still catering to the top 20% and giving them first crack. And it's kind of, even in that, there's still some lottery-based selection there, but we're moving towards a different direction. And at the end of the day, it's about the foundation that you have a season ticket holder base. Green Bay is going to do it way different than the Giants, and the Jets are definitely going to do it way different than the Giants. Shout out to the Giants, great family organization, top notch. The Jets are grinding too, but yeah, it's been a pleasure to get to know those guys out back in this tri-state market.
Yeah, we just got to win some games. We have to get back to the playoffs eventually. So I wouldn't miss going to games this year, simply because I think we'll have a better year, but I don't think it's a playoff year. But we're getting better. I believe in the coach, and I believe in some of the signings. Hopefully the draft works well for us. All right, let's wrap up. So Josh, thank you. This was a great discussion about COVID and the impact on the sports industry. And I encourage everyone to join us on the Business Edge podcast channel. Check out some other episodes about the economy and the stock market, retail, advertising. We've done some really interesting conversations. So any final words before we close up here?
You mentioned diversity of topics there. For any students listening out there, if I had one piece of advice of something business related, non-sport, to help you in your future sport industry job search, because it's a tough industry to break in, checked out our cryptocurrency discussions and things like that, because regardless of if you care, you need to at least have a basic knowledge. You have owners out there like Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks saying that, hey, we're going to accept cryptocurrency as a form of payment now. Are they doing it just to hit the news cycle? Perhaps, but they have a different style of owner there. But this isn't something that's going away. So as a business student, it should at least be something you're aware of, that what a decentralized currency actually means.
Great. So thank you all for listening, and everyone stay safe.
Thank you.